Most of us love our opinions, don't we? I mean, you love you some you. You love the way you see what you see, so much so that what we call them is we call them our convictions. Do you have convictions about some things? I mean, some things that you hold to in the innermost parts of who you are. This is how you see it. We're told that what we see and how we see what we see is the way to see whatever we see. It's interesting. Even people who may tell us to be tolerant are tolerant except for against people who are not tolerant towards them in their view of tolerance, and then they're intolerant towards them because that is their perspective of tolerance. We've got our convictions about how things should be. The reality is our convictions are, I'm going to see it this way and I'm going to do it this way, has bled into the way many people approach their faith. We've become consumers. There are a lot of people of faith, maybe even you, who, if you were honest, if you were true, or maybe better yet, if we could dissect the makeup of your faith, it is a faith built out of consumerism. Now, some of you hear that and you think I'm talking about a selection of church. You're thinking, I mean consumerism as in somebody walking into church and saying, well, I don't really like it because it's dark in there, or it's bright in there, or it's loud in there, or they sang too much. They didn't sing enough. They didn't sing a song I knew. They sung all the songs I know, and I want something new. The pastor preached too short. The pastor preached too long. The pastor preached too loud. He yelled too much. Where is his coat? Where is his tie? I could go on. But I don't mean that when I come to consumerism. Oh, I got a lot of thoughts on that, and I'd be happy to share them with you later sometime, but not right now. I'm talking about a consumerism that is much more dangerous than simply picking and choosing when it comes to the practice of church. I mean, a lot of people have actually become consumeristic when it comes to Jesus. Yeah, we're consumers of Jesus. Here's how that looks. What it does is we applaud the parts of Jesus that endorse our opinions, and we ignore or sometimes even refute the parts of Jesus, the teachings of Jesus, the ideas of Jesus, the way of Jesus that we have issue with. Come on, there's a lot of people who love themselves some love thy neighbor Jesus, but don't want nothing to do with take up your cross and follow me Jesus. You know that's the same Jesus, right? There's a whole lot of people who like miracle working Jesus, bless me Jesus, that don't want nothing to do with die to yourself Jesus. That's the same Jesus. We don't like the fact that Jesus tells us to love our enemies. Ain't nobody like that. We don't like the fact that Jesus says you have to make a choice. You can either serve God or you can serve money, but you cannot serve both. That's Jesus. We don't like that Jesus. I mean, we like the fact that Jesus talks about caring for people and will care for people as long as it fits into my schedule. It's picking and choosing the parts of Jesus that we like, that we want, that line up with our convictions. What it's really doing is it's picking and choosing where we trust Jesus. You know what I've come to realize, though? Is that we like trusting Jesus with eternity, don't we? I meet very few people who don't like to trust Jesus with eternity. We like that. Oh, I'm going to get to heaven. We like the idea that salvation, that on the other side, Jesus is going to look out for us. I interact with people who talk about meeting people in heaven who they knew were not followers of Jesus here on earth. And it blows my mind, but it reinforces this reality that we like trusting Jesus with eternity. We like trusting Jesus with what happens after we're done taking up space and air on this planet. But we dislike trusting Jesus with today. We like trusting him with after I die. We don't like dying to ourselves today to trust Jesus, to trust his ways, to follow his ways, to honor him, to love him, to live for him, to follow what he says now. So we pick and we choose. Well, I came to tell you something today. If you're only following Jesus where he endorses your convictions, then your Jesus is, come on, somebody say the title of this series with me, is not my Jesus. If you're only following Jesus where he endorses your perspective, where he is there for your convictions, where you think he's on the side that you came to this discussion in the first place seeing, then your Jesus is not my Jesus. Welcome to church. Glad you're here. Some of you are having a tough time with this, shall we call it an introduction to this sermon. You know, that's what this is. These moments when I get to share God's word with you, we call those sermons. And I have a conviction about sermons. I believe that sometimes the sermon should sting. Oh, I'm here for a sermon that's going to build me up, that's going to encourage my faith, that's going to make me say, yeah, come on, thank you for your love. I'm here for that. But I believe that sometimes the sermon should also sting a little bit. You know, it's funny. People like to share Bible verses online, don't they? You find some people that love Jesus a little bit. They'll post a Bible verse on Facebook. They'll tweet one. They'll share it on Instagram, whatever. They get you those Bible verses out there. And I love it. I think it's great. What's interesting, though, is most of the time those verses are just the encouraging ones. I believe that sometimes we should read the Bible and it should convict us. Those aren't the pages, those aren't the verses to skip over, to look for the whiteout instead of the highlighter. Those are sometimes the ones that we slowly allow to speak to the deep parts of who we are. I believe the sermon should sing. I believe the Bible should convict us. But most of us don't see it that way. Most of us run from that. We are so pain averse. We will do anything not to hurt. We will do anything not to feel challenged or threatened or bothered, that we've actually forgotten that there's a type of hurt that some people will refer to as a good hurt. You know what I mean when I say good hurt? Come on, have you ever had it hurt, but it was good? That's the way I feel after our grocery drive-thrus. Come on, I love the fact that as a church, we get to bless hundreds of families every single month with free groceries. Come on, your generosity does that, and people serving doing that. I mean, we have people all over the place. We got cars all over the place, and we're giving away literally thousands of pounds of groceries every single month. And let me tell you something. Those don't get prayed into cars, okay? Those don't get wished into cars. No, people work. They organize jalapenos, they organize turkey and ham and whatever we got. They organize it, they load it up, they direct hundreds of cars around our building trying not to get people killed on Summer Avenue. Like, we do all this stuff to be a blessing to people. And when we're done, I think I speak for those who have served at one of these. We tired, man. Like, we tired. But it's a good kind of hurt, too. It's like, man, I really just want to sit up on this couch for a little while. But I'm thankful that I'm tired. It's a good kind of hurt. I like playing golf. And my favorite way to play golf when I play is to walk. Some of you seen people play golf and they ride around these little carts, and that's fine. I prefer to walk the golf course. And to do so, you carry your golf bag, your golf clubs with you. These golf bags, though, if you've ever picked one up, man, they'll be 40, 50 pounds of golf clubs and, stuff that you're taking with you for the round. And shoot, in the summer, that's a long walk, a heavy walk. I mean, 4, 5, 6 miles is how long you walk on a golf course, and carrying the weight of those clubs. You tired when you're done playing golf, carrying this, doing this, sweating. But whenever I get done walking a golf course, I hurt a little bit. I'm to that age. I know it's sad, man. I got to stretch before I play too. Yeah. But it's a good kind of hurt. I enjoyed myself. I have fun. It's a good kind of hurt. I think too often people who say they have a faith, they run from anything that looks or feels like hurt. Anything that looks or feels like pain. Anything that looks or feels like conviction. Because they're like, oh, that may sting a little bit. We need that a little bit because that's who Jesus is. Can I tell you what Jesus does? Write this in your notes. This is the second big idea about Jesus. In part 1, I shared with you that Jesus is God. We're trying to build a perspective of who Jesus is. I need you to understand in part 2 that Jesus challenges convictions. He challenges your convictions. He doesn't just come alongside everything you think and be like, oh, I'm so proud of you. You think right. He challenges your convictions. You know, when I preach, I enjoy response. Come on, that's why I tell you to type in the chat. It builds my faith even now. Preaching to you, we type up in that chat. You come with. But when we in a room together, come on, if you ever join us in person or ever, I enjoy response when I preach. When people say, amen, preacher. When they say, tell that. Make it plain. Tell them, white boy. Like when you talk to me, it helps me. But I've learned something too. I've learned that sometimes silence is the loudest response. Because what it means is that those words maybe are beginning to challenge. They're beginning to convict. They're doing something on the inside that may not harken back yeah, man, come on with it. Sometimes the loudest response is the silent one. Jesus understood this because he challenges convictions. And that's not just what he does today. That's what he did in ministry. See, when Jesus taught, he had this phrase that he would constantly use. Maybe some of you have read the New Testament. You've read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They tell the story of Jesus. And you've come across this phrase that is so repeated by Jesus. He will listen to something or know what people are saying, and he will say, you have heard it said, but I say to you. That's what Jesus will do. He'll say, you've heard it said, but I say to you. See, Jesus interacted, he ministered to a lot of religious people, okay? People that had thoughts about God, people that had thoughts about how God worked and how God operated and what God wanted. And so there was a lot of inundation in them about what it was that God expected, what it is that God might want. And so Jesus came along a lot and he said, hang on a second, I'm here to challenge your conviction. You've heard it said, but I say to you. You've heard it this way, let me tell it to you that way. You've heard it said, but I say to you. He came along to correct, to align, to fix some things that were broken. And I believe that today, that is what God is trying to do even in this moment. As you watch this sermon on Facebook, come on, as you lean in on YouTube, you're watching this at church online. Can I tell you something today? I believe that the Spirit of God wants to say to you today, you've heard it said, but now I say to you. Not just the Jesus that comes along and supports us, not just the Jesus that comes along and endorses us, not just the Jesus that says, yeah, I think you thought that right from the start, but a Jesus that challenges our convictions. That's the Jesus I see. That's the Jesus John presents to us. Today, I want you to meet me in John chapter 8. That's where we're going to start, but for the next couple of minutes, we are going to interact in a few different texts in the early part of the book of John. John knew Jesus personally. And the stories and the teachings that he selected to communicate and to share with people are very different than some of the ones that are in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. There is some repetition, but those three books are known collectively as synoptic gospels because they're so synonymous. They echo each other. John has some of that in there, all the major things, but he tells a lot of different stories, a lot of teachings, a lot of instances, because there's this picture of Jesus he wants to make sure people get, because the picture people were even running around with, start trying to tell people Jesus was like, even in John's day, just a few decades after Jesus had left the planet, John already knew it was not my Jesus. And so he came along and he said, I have to correct this for some people. I have to clear up some things. And so John brings us this story in John chapter 8, where Jesus has been at this festival on the final day of it. He's been teaching. And his teaching has caused some people to start believing him. And then Jesus enters into this conversation with people who believe his teaching. Here's the way it goes in verse 31. Jesus says to the Jews who had believed him, if you continue in my word, you really are my disciples. Then he makes this statement that some of you will be familiar with. He says, you will know the truth, and the truth will, somebody type it in the chat, you already know it. It will set you free. We are descendants of Abraham, they answered him, and we have never been enslaved to anyone. How can you say you will become free? Jesus responded, truly, I tell you, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. A slave does not remain in the household forever, but a son does remain forever. So if the Son sets you free, you really will be free. Jesus makes that statement, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. This is not Jesus's little attempt at creating some fortune cookie worthy statement that could be packaged in a little cookie and cracked open to, oh, this is neat. This was not Jesus's philosophical thought on the idea of truth, that someone being able to know what is true as opposed to what is false will actually bring freedom. A lot of people will tell you that. That is not what Jesus was saying here. Jesus was talking about himself. He says, you will know the truth. That's me. Not me, Michael, but me. I'm acting like I'm Jesus. He said, you will know the truth. And that truth, what did Jesus say of himself? I am the way, I am the life. I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. What Jesus is inviting them into is not some revelation of what is false and what is correct, but he's inviting them to know him. You will know the truth, and I, the truth, will set you free. What's interesting, though, is a lot of people's perspective is that was Jesus' ending statement. Anytime I've heard people talk about this statement, whether in a sermon or even just trying to say, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free, they act like it was some mic drop moment for Jesus. Like Jesus just said it and walked away, but that's not what happened. Jesus actually said, you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. And the people he was talking to replied to him immediately. And they said, we're from Abraham. We've always been free. Which at that moment, I'm surprised that John does not record Jesus laughing at these people in their face. For real. I mean, if I was Jesus, I just would have busted out laughing. Be like, what you talking about? Like, what? We've never been as, we're the children of Abraham, descendants of Abraham. We've never been enslaved to anyone. Man, if I'm Jesus, I laugh in that moment. Because these people are lying to him. You know that, right? More interestingly, they're lying to themselves. So Abraham was the father nationally of the nation of Israel. Literally, he was the grandfather of the man who is the namesake of the nation. Well, the man who's the namesake of the nation found himself in his lifetime in a place called Egypt. And shortly after he died, he actually found all of his children and their children and their children taken as slaves in this land that was Egypt. They spent 430 years as brick-making slaves in Egypt until one day God raised up a man by the name of Moses to come and lead his people out of captivity in Egypt. If I'm Jesus, I laugh at these people when they say, we've never been enslaved, because I'm like, didn't you see the movie? Come on, Prince of Egypt, why? Never been enslaved. And Moses leads them out of literal slavery in Egypt to a promised land. They make it to the promised land, and God blesses them, and God is their king for a while, and they have judges who are able to handle the day-to-day matters. But the people see other nations and say, we want a king like that. And so God anoints a king by the name of Saul. Then he anoints another one by the name of David. Then his son takes over after him, a man by the name of Solomon. And Solomon, while he did many things right, also did some things wrong that had long-lasting consequences. So much so that at the end of Solomon's reign, the nation of Israel divided into a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. The northern kingdom kept its name. It was called Israel, and it didn't last very long, until literally the nation was annihilated by the Assyrians, and the living people became slaves to the Assyrians. The southern kingdom, they honored God. They were called Judah, and they lasted a few hundred years longer. But they were eventually taken over and led into exile by the Babylonians. If I'm Jesus, I laugh at these people. We've never been slaves. They're in that present day in Jerusalem and in their world. But can I tell you, they weren't free, independent people. Rome ruled the day. Not from afar. Rome ruled where they were. Rome controlled the government. Rome controlled the money. They paid their taxes to Caesar. Caesar was Roman, but the Romans had figured out something very shrewd when it came to leading and organizing these territories and these people that they would take over. They would rule everything, but they would give them religious freedom. They say, worship whoever you want to worship, but you're going to need that check sent to me. My name is Caesar with a C, you know? They would give people, they found they were more tolerant, more obliging if they were allowed to worship however they wanted to worship. We've never been slaves to anyone. Here's what I don't want you to miss. Their false historical conviction inhibited them from grasping Jesus' true spiritual conviction. I just said a lot in a sentence. I'm going to say it again. That's why it's here. That's why I'm saying it slow. Catch this. Their false historical conviction inhibited them from grasping Jesus' true spiritual conviction. Jesus was not talking to them about their nationality. Jesus was not talking to them about who their patriarch of their nation was. Jesus was talking to them about sin. Jesus was talking to them about the condition of their sin nature. Jesus was trying to set them free. But because of their false historical conviction, they weren't able to see their actual spiritual condition. Therefore, the opportunity that Jesus was trying to bring through conviction, they missed. Read John 8. They argue with Jesus. No, Jesus, we really have been free. Abraham, come on, we are slaves to no people. Jesus is like, you have wrong history, and your wrong history is causing you to miss what I'm trying to tell you right here. I wonder how many of us miss what Jesus is trying to say to us because of our convictions. Things that we have decided in advance. This may be one of those moments where the sermon stings, so it's okay for it to be quiet in the chat. I'm here for it. But do you have zones that you've said these are off limits? Ain't nobody gonna talk to me about this. I ain't about to hear what Jesus has to say about my money. I ain't about to hear what Jesus has to say about my sexuality. I ain't here to have Jesus speak into my future. I ain't here to have Jesus speak into my business. I ain't here to have Jesus speak into my politics. I ain't here to have Jesus speak into how I raise my kids. I ain't here to... Do you have zones that are off limits? Do you have categories that cannot be talked about? That you've decided in advance how you see it? Because maybe you decided in advance a perspective, a conviction, and you try to find support in Jesus for that conviction, rather than saying, Jesus, what do you have to say about this? I've seen people do some awful things with the Bible, trying to make it say what they were already convicted should be. I have seen people try to mischaracterize Jesus to make him be a something, a someone that lines up with what they are already convinced of. And that picture is not my Jesus. I came to tell you, it's time to stop trying to get Jesus' support on your convictions and to start getting your obedience on Jesus' convictions. Come on, somebody. It's time to stop trying to get Jesus to support what you've already decided. It's time to stop getting Jesus to support what you already think should be. And it's time to come to Jesus and say, Jesus, I will obey what you say. How you see it, I will be. Challenge my convictions. Whatever I hold tightly to, show me that I hold it too tightly. Jesus challenges convictions. What is a conviction, you say? Well, a conviction is a firmly held opinion that shapes how we handle everything. I find it fascinating that you could take two different people, okay, who make the exact same amount of money. I'm talking about to the penny. They make the same amount of money every single year, and you find they live completely different lives. Like one person, like they literally eat every meal at home and they brown bag it. And the other person, they always up on Uber Eats and DoorDash and any other delivery service and any other drive-thru. And they always eat, every meal is eat out. They make the same amount of money, but they have different convictions. One person bought a house that they're paying a mortgage on. The other person chooses to rent an apartment, rent a condo, rent a house. But they make the same amount of money and they do different things. Why? They have different convictions. They have different strongly held opinions that shape everything they do. What's interesting about John is John was very concerned in his writing about Jesus, about making sure his readers caught the way Jesus operated, caught what Jesus did. So much so that John begins his writing in John chapter 1 by explaining Jesus's way he handled everything. How Jesus was convinced and convicted that this is how things should be done. John explains it clearly. In fact, we read it in part 1. I just didn't emphasize it last week. It's in John chapter 1, verse 14. This is the way John records it. He says, the Word became flesh and it dwelt among us. He said, we observed his glory, the glory of the one and only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. The way Jesus handled stuff challenged the convictions of everyone he interacted with. Because Jesus came and operated this way. The Word, Jesus himself, became flesh. He put on skin like us, and he dwelt among us. And we've observed his glory, John said. The one and only Son from the Father. Full, somebody type full in that chat. Full of grace and truth. A lot of us, our picture of Jesus is either a very grace-filled Jesus or a very truthful Jesus. For some people, Jesus is their homeboy. You know what I'm saying? Jesus is, oh, that's cool. I mean, nah, that's Old Testament, all kind of rigid. Jesus would be cool with that. And it's an overemphasization of grace. Other people, it's truthful Jesus. It's like Jesus is angry. It's the truth, the truth, the truth. Can I tell you, both of those are not my Jesus. John would tell you that he was the Word become flesh, dwelt among us. We observed his glory, and he was full of grace and truth. This conviction confuses us. The conviction with which Jesus operated confuses most people because we don't understand grace and truth. See, grace and truth, maybe this will help you, are not scales. Otherwise, balance is the goal. I think that's the way a lot of us see grace and truth. They're a scale. And if grace gets heavy, then we got to come along and balance it out with a lot more truth. So I'm just going to give you truth because I gave you a lot of grace. And maybe a little more grace. Grace and truth are not scales to keep in balance. A little bit of grace and a little bit of truth and a little bit of truth and a little bit of grace. Because otherwise balance was the goal. And that is not what John said. Grace and truth are not supplies. Otherwise conservation is the goal. You know, if you have a supply, you're scared of running out. It does not tell us, John does not explain to us that Jesus was worried about running out of grace, that Jesus was worried about running out of truth. No. Because they're not supplies to be hoarded or managed or stewarded. No. Conservation is not the goal. Grace and truth are not scales to be balanced. They're not supplies to be conserved. And grace and truth are not sides. Otherwise, preference is the goal. Oh, if you would be honest, that's the way most of us view grace and truth. Grace is on one side, truth is on the other. In one corner, you know? Grace over here, truth back here. Let's fight, you know? It's a side to pick. Are you a graceful person or a truthful person? Because you can't be both. That's the way most of us see this. But John saw Jesus live, embody, as the one and only Son from the Father. In every person he interacted with, every instance where he got to work, he got to display his conviction. He gave a full dose of grace and truth. You know, that's actually how John 8 starts. The verses we just read a moment ago, I told you that Jesus got to teach some people, and then he had that conversation that we read with some people who believed him. How did he get the crowd? He got the crowd from what happened at the beginning of John 8. The beginning of John 8, there were these religious leaders who were trying to trap Jesus. They were trying literally to cause a stir and get Jesus off the scene because they were threatened by him. And so the way John records it is that they brought him a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. And there's a lot in this story that I do not have time to share with you today, but my goodness, we could spend a long time here. But he brings just the woman, the man's nowhere to be found, brings the woman caught in the act of adultery, and they lay her before Jesus. And these religious people tell Jesus, our law says that we should stone her. What do you say? Again, they were trying to trap him. Jesus gets down in the dirt and he writes in the dirt. We don't know what he wrote. If you've ever heard somebody try to tell you they know what he wrote in the dirt, can I tell you what they don't know? What he wrote in the dirt. Nobody knows. I could talk to you about the significance of writing in the dirt, but I ain't got time for that. Maybe someday you should ask me, or maybe someday I'll preach on it. It would be powerful, but it doesn't matter right now. Because then Jesus looks up and he looks at these religious people after writing in the dirt for a minute, and he says, let the one of you that's without sin cast the first stone. And he gets back down and he writes in the dirt again. The way John records it is that one by one, these religious leaders with their rocks in their hands, ready to stone. What that means is they were literally going to throw rocks at this woman until she dies. That is what stoning was. It's barbaric. It is terrible sounding, but that's what they were going to do. One by one, they drop their stones and walk away. Jesus then, after a moment, looks up from writing in the dirt, and he notices it's just him and this woman there. And he says, woman, where are your accusers? And the woman responds to him, they gone. And then Jesus makes two more statements, because he's full of grace and truth. Jesus looks this woman caught in the act of adultery, brought before him to be stoned, wherewith he out of his own mouth said, let the one who's without sin cast the first stone, which he knew then all them ain't gonna be able to throw no stones, but he could. And Jesus looks this woman in the face and says, I didn't come to condemn you. That's a full dose of grace. What is grace? Grace is when you get what you don't deserve. The law said, you can not like the law, you can like the law. The law said what it said. Jesus says, I didn't come to condemn you. That's a full dose of grace. But what about, it's a full dose of grace. And some people like to stop the story there. Jesus didn't stop it there. Jesus was not done with his conversation. He says, I did not come to condemn you. Then he tells her, now go and leave your life of sin. Jesus did not brush under the rug the fact that this woman that was brought to him, even though maybe she was brought to him in a wrong manner, even though they created this kangaroo court and tried to make Jesus judge and executioner, even though all of this was done, he did not allow that to be something, well, she got brought to me in a wrong way, I'm just going to skip the fact of what she's been doing. Jesus gave her a full dose of truth. What you're doing does not please God. What you're doing does not honor God. What you're doing is sin. A full dose of grace. I didn't come to condemn you. Now go and sin no more. Can I tell you what I believe? We need a whole lot more of that. A full dose. Somebody help me in the chat. A full dose of grace and truth. Not a little bit of grace and a little bit of truth. Not grace for people who sin like we do, and then we harbor the truth as a weapon to people who sin differently than us. No. A full dose of grace and truth. Grace and truth. Come on, say grace and truth. From your living room, grace and truth. You don't disconnect them. You don't set one over here. You don't pick one up and bring it with you and leave the other one at the house. No. Grace and truth. Our problem is that most of us choose grace for our sins and truth for our strengths. We'll empathize with people who sin like we sin and stone people who sin differently. Can I give you one practical piece of advice as I close this sermon today as to how to live this out? Wherever you're quick to give one, consciously bring the other. What do I mean? There are some people in your life that you are quick to give grace to. The problem is you haven't brought the truth with you to them. There are some people you are quick to tell the truth, bring grace with you consciously. There are some issues in our world, issues in our city, issues in our country, issues in your family, issues in our society that you are very quick to bring the truth to. Bring that truth, baby. But consciously bring grace with it. There are issues that you are quick to bring grace to. Maybe some of you have even turned the Bible inside out, repainted, recharacterized, colored Jesus to make him fit the mold you need him. And you're quick to bring grace. Consciously bring truth with it. Some of us, there are individual sins that we're quick to bring the truth to, or we're quick to bring grace to. Consciously bring the other. Why? Because grace and truth are not subjective. Because Jesus is the goal. You don't get to choose whether you respond with grace or truth. That's not my Jesus. My Jesus, John said, was the Word made flesh, Son of the living God, who came, who operated, who challenged people's convictions because he was full of grace and truth. And my prayer for us, for you, is that we would be people that operate just like that. Not with an either or, but always both and. Can I pray for you today? Jesus, I pray you bring the truth. I pray you bring the grace that we need in this moment. God, help us to be people who interact, who lead, who parent, who manage, who speak, who care, who love, full of grace and truth. Because it's the truth that shows us that we need grace. And it's grace that reminds us that we were never going to be able to handle the truth. We need them both. We need to give them both because you have given both to us. And so, Father, help us. Help us to be people who live, who work, who represent you in a way that is true of who you are, full of grace and truth. God, we love you. We thank you. And we pray all this in your precious name. Amen.